on this edition of the Self-Publishing Show.
I actually did spend 2 years figuring out all my science, figuring out how everything was going to work in the universe, figuring out my setting and whatnot before I started writing anything. And by doing that, that's allowed me to have this canvas that I can just keep painting on forever, basically.
Publishing is changing. No more gatekeepers, no more barriers, no one standing between you and your readers. Do you want to make a living from your writing? Join indie bestseller Mark Dawson and first-time author James Blatch as they shine a light on the secrets of self-publishing success. This is the Self-Publishing Show. There's never been a better time to be a writer.
Hello and welcome to the Self-Publishing Show with me, James Blatch.
And me, Mark Dawson. Hello.
How was that for an energetic opening?
It was a bit hyper. Have you been drinking lots of coffee today?
I am. My wife broke her leg last week, as you know. We were skiing, and I've had to do the job of two men. Well, one woman, one man.
So three men, in other words.
Yes, exactly. Very PC of you. So everything. She can't drive. She can barely walk. And I've been running this business and doing the washing and getting the kids to school and back again. And then I have done more short car journeys in my car in the last 4 days, I think I've done in the previous year. I mean, journeys that last 8 minutes. You go somewhere, back again, then get back again. Because the children never do things together. So that's me, and I'm actually now slightly drunk on tiredness. That's where I am.
I liked your Facebook post when you announced that Jill had broken her ankle, and it was followed by the next day with you having a lovely time on the slopes.
Yeah.
It's like, Jill's broken her ankle. On the other hand, I'm having a great time.
The show must go on, Mark.
Yes.
The show must go on.
Quite.
It'd be foolish of us to just stop because of one little thing like a leg break. Anyway, it was a tibia, as it turned out.
I thought it was an ankle.
Yes. Yeah, well, it's down towards the ankle, the base of the tibia, but it's a tibial break, and it's causing some issues at the moment. But I'll go back and deal with those short. I don't want you to think about me. I don't want you to worry.
No, I don't. Don't worry. Doesn't cross my mind. I
noticed that. I'm going to say hello to some people who will be concerned and give me sympathy. They are our new Patreon supporters. They have been along to patreon.com/self-publishing show and become supporters of this podcast, and they get free, well, as part of their Patreon support, they get access to the SPF University, which is a wonderful university and a place to get live training. We just had a brilliant one actually with on Instagram with Stuart. Just a couple of weeks ago. And our new patrons are, I've got some doozies here. Mark, you'll be pleased. We've got Stephen McGillicuddy from FLA USA. We've got Yakon Peter McElligott from Connecticut, USA. I sound like Harry Potter characters, aren't they? Amy Henson, Vivian Reese, and Lauren Dimer. So that is Stephen McGillicuddy from FL USA, Jakon Peter McElligott from Connecticut, USA, and then Amy Henson, Vivian Reese, Lauren Dimer. Welcome to our family here on the Self-Publishing Show.
Welcome and usual apologies for the state of your welcome.
I don't think they were too bad today. Now, we have a super interview today with Mel Cooper coming up. We're going to be talking about productivity, about how to turn your little your book writing hobby into an industry. I mean, this is something I think closer to the level that you're at, Mark, than perhaps some people listening who are on their 1, 2, 3 books a year. But there are some people out there who have turned it into a bit of a factory. We're going to talk to them about stuff that we can all learn from that process, about how you organize, how you approach it, how you plan. And Mal is excellent on that. So we've got that coming up. But before then, we are going to just mention that our course, Self-Publishing 101, which is the foundation course for new indie authors to teach them everything they need to know, at least authors who are new to marketing, not necessarily new authors, but people who want to take the step away from it being a hobby to being a commercial success, something they can earn money from, hopefully quit their jobs and be full-time writers. This is the course that gives you all the nitty-gritty, the ins and outs, how to do it, how not to waste your time doing stuff that's not going to be pertinent, but how to focus on the things that are going to give you return. And the one thing I think you learn from this that I know, because all the interviews we do about this course that people often repeat to me, is this is the course where you get it, that it's a business, and you understand it's a business, and that changes your culture and your approach. So you can get the 101 course. It's open for about 2.5 weeks. Now, if you go to selfpublishingformula.com/101, and yeah, it's a big expanded course now, of course, because you have the YouTube for Authors course from Garrett Robinson, which is fantastic, a really brilliant course. I mean, that's the sort of course you would pay very good money for elsewhere, without question. It's bundled in now to 101. You get lots of other stuff that comes along with it as well. And there's been a small price increase this time just to take account of that you do get a lot more, but very well worth it. selfpublishingformula.com/101. I'm trying to think what else we've added. We've added loads to 101, haven't we? So Ingram Spark stuff is, I think that's there now. Is that there now? It will be by the time the course goes live. We're recording this.
Yes.
We've got other, and we're always expanding the tech library. I think we're just going through some of the website creation stuff, make sure they're up to date. There's a new Wix course in there. So whichever platform you choose, you'll get handheld through the process of creating your websites. And I'm knee deep in all this stuff now because I'm learning it all, because we've got books to market, you and me.
Yes, that's right. We do. Yes. Yeah, lots going on. Also, so this goes out a week as we record this today. So very soon, well, actually, as this goes out, I'll be having some authors coming to stay with me over the weekend in Salisbury. And then on the Sunday, we'll be traveling down to London for a meal with sponsors and speakers. And then it's the inaugural SPS Live on the Monday.
It is our inaugural conference. We have nearly 1,000 people. We filled every seat we can in that hall, and people are picking up some of the tickets for people who can't make it. I suppose we should, having mentioned it, give that one caveat that where we're recording at the moment, there is obviously the spread of the coronavirus, but it's not impacted us, which we're delighted about. The London Book Fair is going ahead. We are going ahead. Obviously, if you're in an infected area, and there aren't that many. I looked at the list today, and I've been asked about it because I've been to the doctors today. I don't know if I mentioned that. I've been to the doctors today, and they ask you, where have you been? Have you been abroad in the last couple of weeks? I said, yes, I've been in Switzerland and France. Have you been in this? And they hand you a list, and you look at the list, and it's actually still, at this stage, fairly contained. 6 months' time might look different, but we're making hay while the sun shines.
In 6 months' time, we'll all be dead.
What we don't know about the coronavirus is whether, when you die from it, whether the bodies reanimate afterwards. We haven't got to that point yet.
Yes, I think almost certainly that's going to be the case.
I think they're going to reanimate. This is the full-on zombie apocalypse when that happens. There'll be a point where I stop making jokes about coronavirus, but we're not there yet.
Yes.
Okay, good. Look, have you got anything else? I feel like I've been whittering on and stifling your voice.
Well, people do tune in to listen to me rather than you, I suppose. You have the most of the airtime with the interview, so I suppose I should say something. Yeah, it's been busy. But Germany is just going crazy, which for the first time 2 days ago, in order of revenue generated per territory, it's always US first, but it's usually UK. But I think 2 days ago it was US, Germany, UK.
Wow.
Which was great, given that Germany has only 6 Milton books and 3 Beatrix books, so not even, well, I suppose about a third of my catalogue compared to the other markets. So they're just selling like crazy at the moment. It's really, really good. So we've got, my brother and I have found another 3 translators. We, at the moment, as we speak, we've got 5 translators working on the rest of the Milton series, and these aren't people who we found, down the on the street. These are people who worked on James Patterson's books, Donna Tartt, Stieg Larsson. So they're AAA. They've done AAA titles in Germany before, so they know what they're doing. And so we're just lining them up. We've got the rest of the Milton series. Hopefully, we'll have those all out by, if not Christmas, then just after Christmas.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, so going well.
Yeah, Milton storming across Germany. Are any of your Milton or Beatrix books set in Germany? There must be some German stuff.
No, they aren't. But they probably should have one set in Berlin or something. No, I've got the. I should get the Vault translated, because that is set in Berlin.
There you go.
So this is just the Milton books. I've got Atticus coming out soon. That could do quite well in Germany. The Vault, some other standalones, Isabella. So there's lots more books I could be having books translated for the next couple of years, and probably will.
Good. Well, one thing that we should perhaps mention is that Clive Cussler passed away a few days ago at the time we were recording this. And he's somebody who I've been reading over the last couple of years because I think very much in the thriller genre fiction mold. And he writes, I think, quite similar books to yours, actually. I think they're very page-turning, very easy to read, which sounds like it's an insult, but it's not an insult at all. But they're books you can just read, devour, follow the story, go up and down, have an adventure, and then read the next one. He was perfectly set up for this modern indie publishing era, actually.
Yep, absolutely.
I'm sure he did pretty well in his career as a trad publisher, one of the biggest published authors on the planet.
I think he was worth 120 million when he died. So he did quite well.
He did well, and I believe his son does some writing with him now. I think that's right. I think
he has a lot of ghost writers, but I mean Russell Blake wrote two or three books with him. Yes, there is. He took the kind of Patterson, Cussler. Who else is there? Wilbur Smith. Those kinds of guys. They basically stopped writing mostly, and brought people onto the team.
They direct now, but I read a couple of Clive's last year and thoroughly enjoyed them. Yes, in fact, I think reading those books, if you want to write genre fiction, and we talk a lot about this all the time, commercial genre fiction, he's a superb author to read, to understand what that means and what that looks and feels like. He gets that right.
Yep.
Okay, right. Shall we get on to our main interview then?
Let's do that.
So we have Mel Cooper. Now, we had actually a webinar, I think I mentioned this at the beginning of the interview, a webinar with Mel a little while ago about read-through, but Mel is a bit of an expert in a few areas. And in particular, what she and her wife have done is to build this production house in what looks like their basement. In fact, it is their basement, and it's an incredible operation, meticulously planned. And so, okay, this interview isn't necessarily for me, who's trying to struggle to get one book out. And if you've got one or two books you write a year, you may not think it relates to you and me, but actually I think a lot of what Mal talks about in terms of its approach, the business-like approach, planning, does pertain to us, is relevant and is helpful. So let's hear from Mal, and then Mark and I will be back to have a chat off the back.
This is the Self-Publishing Show. There's never been a better time to be a writer.
Mel Cooper, welcome to the Self-Publishing Show.
Thank you.
We've had you on a webinar, which was fantastic. It was a kind of nerdy webinar about getting into Excel and getting into calculating read-through, which is a crucial part of understanding where you are. And we're going to talk a bit about you, but about your writing, particularly, I think, the production process that you have and the prolificness to your writing. Is that a word? I can't get my words out.
It can be.
Yeah, which we're going to try and learn from. But we'll start a little bit with you, because I think you do, I say nerdy, you do have a bit of an engineering background, do you not?
I do, yeah. I was a software developer for almost 20 years, to be honest. And towards the end of that, I actually ended up working on some really big, like Fortune 500 projects. Did crazy stuff, like I built out part of the backend system for Obama's WhiteHouse.gov.
Wow.
It was actually funny. The company I worked for, we were actually working on, we ran Mitt Romney's campaign website. We built Obama's White House website, and we ran Al Jazeera's U.S. Websites.
Wow, very pluralistic of you.
Yeah, we would host it all. But so I did a lot of that and got a lot of work. Got involved with a lot of marketing work. So I built actually marketing platforms and worked with a lot of marketing platforms, and also just got really, spent a lot of years in software. So I have a really good idea of how the internet works, and that's been pretty useful in this business, to be honest.
Hasn't it just? And you've done really well. You have a terrific set of books and series out, and I want to talk to you a bit about the sort of process that you use now to write, to get through the sort of production line of getting books out there. Not to denigrate production line, sounds like a denigration, but it's not at all. So
I agree.
What point did you go from software engineer, making sure that all these politicians and countries could work, to writing books?
I'd actually released my first book in 2012. So I did, my first book was 2012, second was 2015, and third was 2016. And all during that time was actually when I was doing a lot of software development work. So I didn't get a lot of time to actually put into writing, and I didn't spend any time marketing at all. And it was in 2016 when Jill, my wife, started doing a bunch of the marketing, and I started leveraging what I learned in the past And we went from making like $500 or $600 a month in June to $25,000 a month in November. And then I quit my job on January 1st.
So when Mark preaches about treating your writing as a business, that's probably what happened with you. It went from being something you were doing as a hobby to, once Jill was involved, it being a business.
Yep. Yeah. We started investing in it like it was a business, both time and money. And that was like a lot of people, I say to them, like, I'd only had like 3 months of measurable good success. And I quit my job at that point because I realized that there was no way I could just continue to scale my writing business the way I wanted to, and also be working a job. Having a day job would have actually ended my career, because I wouldn't be able to put out as much and have as much focus on it. So I had to basically make a business decision and say, I'm going to invest time and money fully into writing. And I gave myself I had a 1-year plan that I had to go through to pull it off. And luckily I managed to do that.
That's still quite a brave move. Did it feel nervy at the time?
Oh, it was terrible. Yeah, 2017 was a terrifying year for me. I was constantly worried that it was all just going to evaporate and dry up. And that's why I spent so much of my time focusing on controlling as much as I could about the process and creating the books and marketing them and whatnot, because I didn't want to feel like I was just like being blown around in the winds by whatever might happen. And I wanted to really make sure it worked. I have a pretty marketable skill set outside of writing, though, so I wasn't as worried as maybe some people would be, because if I'd wanted to get a job, I would have actually had a job again in a day or two.
Yeah, you felt there was a safety net. But some people will never take that type of risk. And I've got friends, because I've done similar to you a couple of times in my life, so I've dropped everything and started again with a different career. Mm-hmm. And some friends have been honest with me, said they just couldn't countenance the idea of quitting a job that's paying them a salary to take a chance on something else. It's still a big thing to do, I think.
Yeah. And yeah, you do. I mean, hopefully no one would ever do it without a safety net. Like, you got to make sure you have a safety net. You got to make sure you can plan for your family and your future and whatnot, and something to fall back on. So yeah, if someone didn't have a safety net, it would be a terrible idea. And I would certainly not recommend that. But I think if you do, you could be honest with yourself and say, how long can my safety net carry me? And can I put together a plan to be successful in that amount of time?
Now, Jill is integral, I think, to the process today.
She is. And she always has been. She's always been, she was always my first beta reader back in the day. She runs a lot of the day-to-day business for us. She does like all the bookkeeping and the accounting and make sure all the taxes are filed and all that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of the productivity that I'm able to pull off is because I have Jill, who's crazy. She almost writes as much as I do, and she does all this stuff. So she's really the real success story, I think. But yeah, she really does this great job of sort of making this bubble for me where I don't really get distracted and I can just sit down and work a lot, so when I talk, sometimes I tell people how many books I write, and like, you don't have to feel like you're not successful just because you can't do this, because this is a unique situation that I'm in that you might not be in.
So Jill gets to do all the exciting things like the tax returns.
She does.
It sounds like an ideal relationship. Okay.
I feel terrible sometimes about it, but she said she likes it. She said she likes. She's one of those people who really likes to create a great environment for people around them and care and nurture. So for her, it's something she actually really enjoys. We've talked about it a lot because I want to make sure I'm not taking advantage of her. But no, she's pretty happy with the way things are. She likes doing all that.
That's great. It's a very powerful asset in life, I think, to have a supportive partner like that. Or
absolutely.
Well, let's talk about productivity, and then we'll wind back a little bit to the early days. So tell me now where you are in terms of your output.
So this year, my plan is to put out about 35 books. Last year was lower, was only about 24. And then 2018 was 44 books. And sort of my lesson I tell most people is like, here's how I wrote 44 books in 2018, and here's why you probably shouldn't do that.
Yeah. But just to dwell for a second, 44 books is knocking on a book a week. In fact, if you go for a little bit of holiday here and there, that's a book a week.
Yeah, I had 8 weeks where I didn't release a book. I took it easy for a little bit in the year. And some of that's with co-authors. But when I do a co-author book, I spend actually as much time on a co-author book as on one of my own, because all the books I write are in one universe. So they all have to be very consistent with one another. Everything has to be cohesive, and you can't have a co-author introduce some sort of technology or storyline that breaks someone else's. So it does actually take a lot of work to manage all of that. But we pulled it off, actually. And I knew when I was going into it, when I went to 2018, I knew that that the key to success as a writer, of having longevity is having a big backlist. Everybody that I talked to that had started in the game back in the early, the aughts or even in the early teens and was still around and still doing well, had a big backlist, and they were leveraging that backlist. And at that point, my mindset was, I'm feeling energized. I have stories just coming out my ears. I'm young. I'm used to working really long hours, because software development, you work 60, 80 hours a week. So I just basically just worked for an entire year. My goal being to build this big backlist and to get this ball rolling, so that if I wanted to take a break in the future, I could, and it wouldn't be the end of the world.
So you did 24 books, then doing 24 in 2019 must have felt like a holiday for you, just 2 a month.
It was kind of wild. Like in July and August, I only released a novella each of those months, and it was just kind of wild that's all I was doing, and I just sort of enjoyed summer. I also went to a lot of cons last year. I was away from home for almost 3 months, so that affects all the writing that you're able to do or not do as well. But it was nice to be able to do that, to be able to take that year and relax and to sort of reset and figure out where I wanted to go next, and not have to worry about running out of money or having to run off to a day job or something.
Okay, so I want to talk a bit about the writing process in a bit, but let's just wind back, as I said, to the beginning. In terms of the universe you created, so how planned was this? At the beginning, you just start writing, right?
No, actually, I planned it out quite a bit.
You did?
One of my biggest pet peeves has always been sloppy universe building. When you're reading books in a universe, and you can tell after a while that the author just never really thought a lot of things through in advance, and they're just sort of, when you start to be able to tell they're really just making it up as they go along, it really can kind of ruin the story, especially in a longer series where you figure they must have some sort of plan or big vision that they want to have. And if they don't, you start to feel really disillusioned by the whole thing. I didn't want to have that happen. I didn't want the readers to read it and say, like, well, if you're going to tell us about this thing now, it should have been foreshadowed before, because the characters would have encountered that particular scenario. So I actually did spend 2 years before I even started writing, back in 07 and 08, figuring out all my science, figuring out how everything was going to work in the universe, figuring out my setting and whatnot before I started writing anything. And by doing that, that's allowed me to have this canvas that I can just keep painting on forever, basically.
So you try to avoid the sort of thing we saw in the Rise of Skywalker film, where they just trashed all over the physics that they set up in the first film, which I find really irritating.
Yeah, it's actually, I've been talking about, Jill and I actually talked about that for quite a while this morning, because one of my biggest pet peeves in storytelling is inconsistent travel time. Mm-hmm. Where characters and people can just sort of magically get to wherever they need to be in whatever amount of time the plot demands. I have a lot of trouble with that, because I actually think that, like, for example, if you're writing a story about planet Earth, you can't have someone get from New York to Moscow in 30 minutes. You have to have, the travel time in there, and that actually, the setting becomes a character. The characters have to work against the setting and that sort of thing. And what it does for a writer who really wants to stretch themselves is actually makes you better, because you're like, okay, now I've got to come up with a reason for why this happens and make it compelling for the characters and the reader and whatnot. It'll make you a better writer. And yeah, in this latest Star Wars trilogy, everything could just happen at whatever speed the plot demanded as far as travel was concerned. And it just started to feel like it was just like sloppy and weak on the writer's standpoint. And to be honest, J.J. Abrams is better than that. So I was kind of disappointed that he was that careless with the travel time.
Yeah, and I think it's not just a sort of irritation about sort of the respect of the universe you started to build. As you say, you lose those opportunities of them. I always think of the first Star Wars film where Han Solo's he's laughing at the training that's going on with Luke and Obi-Wan. That's actually a really good scene. It's a quiet scene, not much is happening. He's sitting there. You get a lot of character about Han, and you also understand Luke's sudden conversion, his sort of journey, his glimpse into a bigger world. Now, all of that happens in a scene that had to happen because they were traveling. Once you lose that, as you say, you never have that anymore. And that's what I really felt those last few films lacked, those moments where people were doing nothing else. You lose out on all those quiet moments where you get to learn more about the characters and stuff like that. It's actually really important. Anyway, we could probably talk all day about... one other thing I'll say, Game of Thrones, the TV version of Game of Thrones, where suddenly all the journey stuff, which was brilliant, and the reason you watched it in the first few seasons, suddenly they went from north to south in the blink of an eye, and that sort of irritated people as well. Anyway, we will park that for the moment. We've made that point. So tell us about the universe. Tell us about the universe you've created. Sure, yeah. So one of the things I decided is that... and this was a bit of a progressive decision. My OCD about the setting lent itself well to some later decisions I made, which was nice. But as I
So I guess first what I decided to do is I wanted to write science fiction, but I wanted to write science fiction that was optimistic, but also realistic. So I wanted to try and blend those two things because, for example, in Star Trek, Star Trek's very optimistic sci-fi, but there's a lot of scenarios where Star Trek is just kind of like, if you can travel that fast and you have this big a fleet, why do you even have these other problems? There's problems they have that should have been solved just by the setting being what it was. So I wanted to make sure I didn't have those types of issues, but so that's why I made it a good setting. But I moved it forward past all the messy parts in Human Advance. I started the story in the year 4000. Because I wanted to have AIs. I wanted to have humans with AIs, like even implanted in their brains, and have lots of physical augmentations, but have people look clean and good, and not like these monstrous cyborg things running around that are just sort of gross and disgusting and whatnot. I want to sort of create this clean future where humanity and AIs had learned to blend together and work together, and then take that. And also have where most of our major issues have been resolved, where we're not constantly clawing at each other all the time, and then take that and see how people would move forward, and also keep a lot of my conflict external. I'm a really big believer in if you're writing for entertainment, you want to have more external conflict than internal conflict. You want to build a core team of people and not have those people constantly at each other's throats. You want to keep the conflict external. I think a great example of that is the A-Team TV show. Those four guys always had each other's backs. They were always like, even though they would bicker and fight sometimes, push came to shove, they always had each other's backs, and they could joke and laugh and have a really good time together. So I want to also tell that kind of story. So I created a future where humanity is very advanced, but they still don't have faster than light travel. So if you want to get to the next star system, it's still going to take you, maybe 30, 40 years to get there. Because one of the things I actually loved growing up was I loved reading stories about the journey, like Lord of the Rings, the Shannara books, where most of the time they're just traveling across the map in the Shannara books, trying to find the ring or the sword or something like that. And I love the journey and because you get to have like all sorts of little fun episodes in the journey. You get lots of opportunities for character growth in a journey story, and I guess maybe partially is what I grew up reading. So I wanted to create a setting where any journey would have to be long, and it would always have to have its own perils and be fraught with its own problems and stuff like that. So I wrote all of that out. And then actually it's kind of funny. Then later on in the series, they discover FTL, and I completely subvert all of that. And now you have these people who just spent centuries to get from one place to another, and they can get back in a week if they want to and stuff like that. So it was I wanted to write about that and about how those advances in technology would actually plummet humanity back into a dark age. And then deal with a bunch of stuff around that. And that sort of created an opportunity for me to write a actual massive space war, and a massive space war like on the scale of World War II, but across millions of star systems, which eventually becomes a story that I could write for the rest of my life and not even like cover a fraction of what actually would happen in a scope that big. So I had sort of set it all up. And I knew that these things were possible, but as I started doing more work, selling books and marketing and understanding how to make a living doing this, I realized that the biggest thing authors talk about being a problem is when they genre hop, trying to get their readers to come with them. You magpie around, you lose a lot of your readers. And I thought, what if I could create a setting that is so real that it could host any genre? If I wanted to write about like sword and sorcery stuff, I could actually have like a lost colony where some people still have really advanced tech and it looks like magic. And if I wanted to write, like a lot of really military science fiction, I can have a more advanced region where people are like, it's all just admirals and space battles and stuff like that. So I was able to create this setting where I can now tie everything together, and readers can get Easter eggs, even if they're like in some little backwater place, they can say, hey, wait a second, that's like tied to this thing that happened in this other series over there that was completely unrelated. So that helps. That's part of what helps me write so fast is I don't constantly have to rebuild my setting and reestablish how everything works and whatnot. I can jump into a book and say, okay, this book has all these main setting elements and it has this tweak on it, and I can just go.
And you have the universe you created, and some great points there which I want to pick up in a minute. But just for a moment, do you have series within the universe, and are all your books designed to be also standalones, or do you have to read in series?
Each series has to be read in order. Yeah, I don't write any standalone books. Although I do my best to write it so that you can pick up any series and just use that as your starting point to jump into the universe. You don't have to start with a particular book or a particular series. You can kind of go in anywhere.
Okay. Because we had a discussion about that, and sometimes the difficulties, particularly in fact with read through, if you discover you've got a problem in the middle of your series, it can be beneficial for the writer whose books are linked but also standalone, because they can start running ads to book 4 rather than book 1, for instance. But I guess you're in a position where you need them to start at book 1 in a particular series.
Yeah, but I also have 23 series as well. So if I have one series,
that's the other way around it.
Yeah, if I have one series that's kind of having problems, I'll just won't market it as much.
Yeah,
and I can wrap that series up. In fact, we had one series where the read through was dropping off enough that we decided, okay, we're going to wrap this series a little bit earlier, and we'll just take the same characters and start them in a new series. So I can now market that as my book 1.
That's great. Well, I love the description of the universe. I love the fact that you bring reality into it. Again, I'm going to use Star Wars, but for me, as a 10-year-old boy, seeing spaceships that needed thumping to get them working and looked a bit tatty was a complete revelation. And of course, that inspired Ridley Scott with Alien, one of the greatest, space films. Up until that point, everything was shiny and new and worked brilliantly because it was in the future. Well, why? Still going to have... And then, so I'm going to mention Alien as well, because about the internal conflict, which I think is a really interesting point. So I think I'm probably a bit like you in that I don't really get drawn or enjoy those films where there's so much screaming and shouting against each other. You feel, I guess some people do like that, but for me, it's when people work as a team, it feels better. There's very few exceptions that almost prove the rule. Alien, I think, is one of them, where the first Alien film, they're basically oil rig workers, and there's a lot of shouting at each other, and it works brilliantly. But in a later version, in Prometheus, it was awful when they just shouted at each other, and you're thinking these people would never have been selected for this flight, and I just sat there groaning through it. It was just wrong.
It really worked with the first Aliens movie, because it was just a crew of people that were just hired just to do their job with the spaceship and not make a particularly close-knit functional team to the same degree. Prometheus, like, these are specialists that you're hiring specifically because you want to achieve a goal, and they acted like idiots.
It made no sense, did it? Yeah,
this is not believable at all.
But at the same time, as writers, we're often told internal conflict is what it's all about. You have to have all this internal conflict. I find that, I'm obviously nowhere near in terms of your experience of writing, but I do find that a little bit conflicting, ironically.
Yeah, I think the thing that it depends, I suppose, a bit on what you're trying to write. I mean, some genres don't lend themselves well to a lot of external conflict, so you have to have some amount of internal conflict. But I mean, if you're writing an actions adventure type story, you definitely want to focus much more on the external conflict. And also, I feel there's a realism standpoint. Like, after you've worked with people for a certain amount of time, if you haven't killed each other after a couple of years, chances are you've worked out most of the problems that would cause you to have a lot of this internal conflict as a team. Like, you think about everybody has like some stuff in their family that's a mess, but most of the time you have a couple of family members that you actually get along pretty well with. And like, by the time you're in your 30s or 40s, most people you spend time with on a daily basis are people you get along with. If you don't get along with them, you wouldn't spend time with them. So the same thing's kind of true for a story as well, is that a lot of times, if you're going to have people that either work together for a long time or have been together for a long time, and the only reason why they're still together is because they function well. Unless, of course, you want to mess it up and put someone in a new job, or they hate someone, or someone hates them, or something like that. But that's different than just people who should be having each other's back, just bickering over silly things.
So you have, how many series did you say you have? 23?
23, yeah.
23 series, all set in the same universe.
Yeah.
Do you have a strict plan going forward as to when you're writing what book on a new series, etc.?
It's not super strict. It used to be, like, back in 2018, we were so driven by Amazon's 90-day, and most of last year too, the 90-day preview cycle, that I was writing 8 series simultaneously. But I was doing one book in one series, one book in the next, one book in the next, because I was just always like, working against that 90-day deadline. Now that we have the 1-year deadline, and we also get that forgiveness where you can move each book once for 30 days and not lose your pre-order privileges, I can be a little more flexible. If I'm feeling like I want to write story A today, I can actually go work on that instead of story B, which is nice. But by and large, I do, like, right now I have my publishing schedule worked out all the way into June, with what dates every book comes out, what dates they have to get uploaded, what dates they go to the editor, what dates they go to my proofreaders. All that stuff is all built out and then marked off which ones have covers, which ones I've made the request, I'm waiting on the cover to be delivered. All that stuff's all mapped out in this giant spreadsheet that gives me all the dates for when everything needs to happen. Sort of the production line you're talking about. Yeah. And to be honest, if you want to have high levels of productivity, you have to have a process like that. And I do it all the way down to the day of the week things happen on. I only release books on Thursdays. And I do that because that drives all of my other activities. There's always an email on Thursdays when there's a release, and I always run sales on Sundays. And if it's a new release that I want to run a sale for, I don't always do that. But if there is, that gives me time to actually make sure the sale price is set between Thursday and Sunday, and I don't have any problems or anything like that. And also I know, like, okay, and now between Sunday and Thursday is when I'm marketing the book that came out last Thursday. And that's when that sale period is going on. And things like, okay, and I know that whenever a book comes out on Thursday, the upload I always do pre-orders for everything. The pre-order upload is on Sunday. So I'm like, okay, got to be back from these people, and these particular tasks all need to be done so that the book can be uploaded on Sunday. And then in addition, because everything's a pre-order, I have to make sure that whenever a book comes out, the pre-order for the sequel is up Thursday before the Sunday, so that I make sure I have an ASIN to put for the link. So when I upload my book on Sunday, the pre-order is already up, and I have an ASIN number to put in so that people can download the pre-order for the next book when they're done the one they're just reading. So that process makes it really easy to know what you're doing, because everything's just tied to the day of the week when stuff is going on. I don't have to ever think like, oh, I've got to send out an email on a Tuesday. I never send emails on Tuesday, so I don't have to worry about it. Tuesday's a day that I can always write and don't have any other tasks to do.
So quite procedural, and by the sounds of it, it has to be like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have ARC teams.
I kind of lifted something from Michael Anderle called a JIT team, just-in-time readers. And the just-in-time readers get the book usually somewhere between 1 and 4 days before they need to be finished reading it. So sometimes I only give them 1 day, and they're not usually too happy about that.
Okay,
but usually they get 3 to 4 days to finish reading the book and to give me all their typos that they find and any feedback. Yeah, whole book.
Okay.
Yeah. I find if I give them more time than that, it doesn't happen. More people complete it if I give them less time.
Okay. Everyone loves a deadline.
Yeah, it is. And to be honest, also that was sort of partially founded in 2018 when there's a new book coming next week. So if you can't read the book this week, you're going to fall behind. So they did have to keep things up. But there's about a good group of like 10 to 20 of my readers who will actually consistently get a book done. Some of them read it in 1 day. I'll send them the ARC like in the morning, and by evening I have all their feedback on all the typos or any other issues they found. Wow. So they're pretty, like, because some of these whale readers that are out there, they'll read like 2 to 3 books a day regularly. It's just what they do all the time. So it's pretty wild.
Yeah, it's incredible. And so your JIT team, is that per series, or do you have one across all your series?
I have one across everything. So the same group of people get all the books.
Okay. And you, how big is a mailing list for you? You talk about your email on a Thursday.
I actually have a relatively small mailing list because I prune it a lot. And I don't do anything to grow my mailing list other than people actually going to my website and signing up for it. I don't even have links in the backs of my books. I probably need to fix that. I took them out for a while because I was doing an experiment, and I found that I didn't see a big change in the number of new signups I got. But I'm thinking I'm going to try a new structure for trying to get them signed up in my the backs of my books. But it's only about 6,000 people that are active subscribers right now.
Okay, that's interesting. Because I imagine that you've got a fairly significant reader following, if not everybody's on your mailing list.
Yeah, I have, based on the numbers I've run, I have about 25,000 people who have read every single one of my books.
Wow, that's amazing. Devoted.
Yeah, it's a pretty sizable group. But I also have a lot of other ways I reach out to people. Like I've got 4 Facebook pages that I maintain. And some of them are more, they're less, they're not branded to Aeon 14 or me. They're just sort of genre-based pages. Okay. But I build up sort of followers on those pages, and I mark my books to them there. A lot of that marketing is just posting about them when they come out. So I've got multiple Facebook pages where I can just throw out a post and not boost it or anything and get like 1,500 eyeballs on it. And it doesn't cost me anything. Whereas 1,500 people on my mailing list, it all starts to add up. And then I've got Patreon. I've got a Discord server, which is like a chat server where I engage with a lot of my fans. So when I want to reach out to my fans, I have about 5 different venues that I can use to do that, and it's not all just a mailing list.
I don't know how you keep on top of it all, though. I struggle. I often have this where you think you've got to reply to somebody, and I can't find what bloomin' channel they messaged me on in the first place. There's so many different places now. I make calendar events for it all. So when I put off replying to someone, like I need to get back to them, I make a calendar event for like a couple of days, and I mark who it is and what I need to get back to them on. Yeah, otherwise I'll totally forget. Whether it's WhatsApp or Messenger or email even.
Yep.
Call me an old exactly. I like email. Good. Okay, well, let's talk about the writing process.
Sure.
Mal, because I mean, this is how many hours a day do you write? What's your kind of word count?
So I'm usually writing by 10 a.m. I do my, it sort of depends. When I'm starting off a book, I find I work a lot better if I get out of bed and I just start writing first thing. But once the book is sort of flowing for me, usually once I get around the 1/4 to 1/3 mark, then I usually switch around. I don't start writing until 10 a.m. I do admin work in the morning. But I'll sometimes start writing at 8 or 9 a.m. and I'll be at my keyboard until 10 o'clock at night. So with like a break for like hanging out with my daughter and supper time and stuff like that. But otherwise, I'm just at my computer the entire time.
Wow.
And I'm not always writing. Like Jill. So I have a sort of another way I'm really lucky in having Jill is that we do sprints together. So I always have this sprinting partner available. We sit there and we do sprints, but we take breaks. Like I take 15 to 20 minute break every single hour. Where I might pop on Facebook and chat with some people, or maybe I go read a news article or something like that. Because I find if I just try to write straight through for 5 or 6 hours, it'll just crush me. Sometimes I can. Sometimes I'm just the flow is going and the words just keep going. I don't need to stop and take a break. But when I find that I'm struggling to figure out what to say next, that's when I need to take a break. Get a cup of coffee, walk around a little bit, something like that, to get myself back at it. But I strive to hit at least 5,000 words every day. I don't always hit that, but I also don't beat myself up when I don't. I'm like, you know what? I treat it like every day is a new day. I don't need to make up for yesterday's word count today. I just have to try for that 5,000 again. Because I find if you start building up this word count debt, it's a morale killer. And it's all like I was at with 20 books on stage in one of the presentations. I think it was Kristen Catherine Rush that was beside me. And she said, basically, it's all mind games. When it comes to getting your word count down, it's all about the mind games. And you have to make sure they're positive mind games, not negative mind games, or mind games that reinforce you. And so a lot of this is not beating yourself up and knowing when it's time to take a break is a really big thing I find. But if you are going, like my best day ever, I still remember this day because it was a day I decided I never wanted to do this, work that hard again. But I did 10,000 words in revisions, and then I wrote 14,000 words after that. And I was just like, by the end of that, I'm like, I hope I never have to do this again.
Yeah, that's a novella in a day.
Yeah, that was 8 a.m. till midnight that I worked that day.
Yeah, that's not good.
Yeah, it's
amazing, but not sustainable.
Yeah, that's why I say like I did 44 books in a year, and you probably shouldn't.
Yes,
and neither should have I. I shouldn't have done that either.
And Jill's writing. So you collaborate a bit. I looked at a few of your series in preparation for the interview and see other people's names on quite a few books. Yep. Do you and Jill collaborate in your universe?
Yep, she writes under Chris J. Pike in my universe. So I think she's done 10 books now in my universe.
Okay. And are they books that you work on together, you plot together, or she's...
Yeah, the process I work with my co-authors in general is that we figure out a setting. And I work out the setting down, like I'll even do maps of the solar system or any planets where it takes place, and we'll describe what the government's like, and we'll make maybe like a couple of main governmental characters and name like some government agencies or the military and stuff like that. So we know sort of what this general backdrop is that the story is going to be written in. And then they have references to look up for that sort of thing. And then we work out sort of like who the main characters, like what kind of story do we want to tell? Is it like a scrappy teen who's coming of age? Is it like a grizzled military veteran? We talk about what kind of character we want to have. Because a lot of it is about the marketing too. Like we're thinking like, okay, we want to fill this niche, or we want to make a character that we can then market to this particular type of reader to suck them into the vortex, So we'll think about that. Well, what kind of story, what kind of character we want to tell, what kind of story they're in. And I find that starting with a setting and a character works the best, because now you have this fleshed out human being that you've made up in your brain, and you put them in this setting and you say, what will they do? And because you know the character and you know the setting, the answers become a lot easier. You just sort of, what they're going to do, because here's the box that they're in. They have to, they can't operate outside this box. We've defined the setting already. And of course, then you also just set up the threat. What is the threat? What's the thing they're struggling against? And usually, and then we also say, like, at the end, we want them to win or lose or have this new problem that they have to deal with. And then I just sort of let the co-author just go from there. It's their job to get from there to the end. Of course, still, we talk a lot in the meantime and work things out and whatnot. But I give them a lot of free reign to do that. And then I do a pass through afterwards where I make sure that the setting and the science aligns with the rest of the broader universe. But I really do my best not to change my co-author's voice. I really want them to have their own unique voice in the story. And the thing I like about it is because it's this big universe where I eventually want to get to 500 books in the universe, I can't think of all the the settings and scenarios and unique people myself for that. So having these co-authors helps a lot with that as well. And that's what I do with my co-authors for the process is actually pretty much what I do for myself too. I know I've got this character that I want to tell a story about. I know their setting, and I know where I want to go, and I just write from the beginning to the end, and that's about it.
And you do obviously all the publishing. And how much do your co-authors take part in the marketing?
Most of my co-authors don't have very large platforms, so I do almost all of the marketing. I have 2 co-authors that are also, in addition to Jill, so I guess 3 total, who have some amount of success in science fiction, so they do a bunch of their own marketing as well. But really, they're authors that it's from a readership marketing standpoint, I'm doing more of that work, and they're doing more of the bringing ideas side of the story. So most of that stuff still does fall on me. The one thing I have found is that at this point where my stories are, it's really hard to bring in existing authors, because you can't say to another author like, hey, can you go read 90 books before you write a book of mine? That's like a time investment they just can't make. But I've actually found 2 co-authors so far in my fan base, right? Which has been really useful because they've read all the books and they've been aspiring to write and whatnot. So for them, it's a lot easier to get them going in it. And they're also really invested because they're fans and they really love the universe and whatnot. So I don't have to worry about them not feeling it. And the third part of it too is that because like a lot of authors, if it's a full-time author, there's a lot on me to make sure it's paying them enough. Like I want to make sure this release is good for this co-author because it's their paycheck. I don't want to screw them over. But with someone who's just coming in as a fan, it's a lot easier. They still have a full-time job and whatnot. So it's a lot less stress on them and me for the story to be a success. So it becomes more of a fun scenario with that.
Yeah, that's rather lovely as well, isn't it? Your readers who are already big fans become part of a more important part of that of your world.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's kind of in many respects is the best thing to have. And once you have enough readers, there are going to be ones out there who actually have the writing chops too. So
sure.
It's not like you have to like find sort of mediocre readers to pull it off. But yeah, it's great because they come in with their own ideas. They're like, well, I read these books, and what would happen if XYZ happened? I've always wanted to know what these characters did or what happened when they left this place. So they come in with a lot of these great ideas. And you're like, I would never have thought of that. I just sort of wrote that and moved on. And they're like thinking about this detailed scenario and have all these ideas. So it's really cool to have that happen.
Yeah. So let's talk about marketing a bit. What marketing are you chiefly focused on at the moment, Mel?
The majority of my marketing is from a spend standpoint is Facebook. And the way I operate is to spend only about 10 to 15% max on Facebook ads. So of my gross royalties, 10 to 15% max on Facebook ads, and then 5% of my gross royalties is spent on AMS ads. And that's something I learned from in the 20 some odd years I was in software development. I was always closely tied to the marketing departments. I was either building the platforms that supported the marketing department, or I was building the product that the marketing department was then selling. So I was always actually closely tied with the budgeting of marketing. And I actually learned a lot from some of the companies I worked for. And the norm is that if you're spending more than 20% of your people use the word net and gross differently, but I guess like inbound cash. If you look at your inbound cash flow over the course of a year, if you're spending more than 20% of your money coming in on marketing, you're basically doing something wrong. You're being, and by wrong, I mean you're being inefficient somewhere. Most businesses are capable of growing 50 to 100% a year, only reinvesting 20% of their money into marketing. So that's sort of a lesson I learned. Now there's all sorts of exceptions for why that might not be the case if you're launching a new product or you're trying to build out a new thing of some sort. But in general, that's what I stick to. So that's where my spend goes. I do find that still one of the best vehicles is getting good newsletter swaps with other authors. So I do. I think that's probably when it comes to effectiveness, that's easily a third of the effectiveness I get out of marketing is by doing that. And then I think the other major thing that I do is all about these different outreach ways I talked about constantly. Like I'm a chatty Cathy. I'm this weird extrovert author. There's not that many of us, to be honest, but I'm one of them. And I love to be online talking with my fans and chatting about things and whatnot. And I've kind of got a reputation of being this author who's always perfectly willing to sit down and have a conversation with fans. And I'm super accessible. Like I'm on Facebook, I'm on Patreon with them, I'm on Discord chat server talking with them and stuff like that. So they really feel like they have a lot of access to me. And then they bring their friends in, to take part in these conversations that we get to have and stuff like that. So that turns into a pretty big marketing mechanism as well.
Yeah, best marketing, that word of mouth, isn't it? So
yeah,
always has been. And the Facebook ads you're running, they're direct sales ads or mailing list or?
direct sales ads. I don't. I'm changing my tune on this ever so slightly, but if you do the math, running Facebook ads to get email addresses is the worst possible way to do it. If you do dollars to donuts, because if you think you've got, say for example, you've got an amazing ad, and this ad is getting a 1 in 3 conversion. So so every time someone clicks on this ad, 1 in 3 times they actually complete your form, and you get a good email address out of it. And say that ad is only costing you 10 cents per click. Well, now you're paying 30 cents per email address. If you instead go on BookFunnel with a bunch of other authors and do a big promo on BookFunnel, even where you all have to spend money like $100 to $50 to $100, you can oftentimes get returns good enough to be down to 3 cents per email address. Now, granted, you're sharing those email addresses with a certain number of other authors, so you have to take that into account. But it's on average that using Facebook to get email addresses is 10 times more expensive than most other venues for getting email addresses, which is why I don't do it. But you do have other opportunities, like you have a special relationship with that person now where they clicked on your ad and got your book. So you do have to weigh that. But I do find that in general, it's not an efficient way to get email addresses.
Although it's probably worth saying at the beginning of careers, it can be more beneficial particularly if you're not necessarily expecting to make a return at that stage, you need a platform to start building, and then I mean, there are certainly specific scenarios where it makes sense, and I've actually done it a couple of times under specific scenarios where I actually want to create a specific marketing funnel where I made the first touch with this particular reader, and then drew them through this series of marketing events. So in those scenarios, yes, it did work, and it was a good way to do it. But I sort of feel like if I'm just start trying to throw out an ad just to get people to sign up and grab something, there's more efficient ways of doing it than using Facebook. Facebook's not the cheap. I guess I think that the marketing activity is a good marketing activity to do. I just think that Facebook is a very expensive way to do that particular marketing activity. Sure. And so on that front, do you give away book one in your series generally?
No, I do. All my book ones are 99 cents though.
Okay.
I don't believe in free books, actually. I think that books should not be free, because of the psychological scenario that it creates where people start to think the books are free, because they shouldn't be. They take money to make, and they represent a lot of effort. So
yeah, good. So they should. And when you do run your direct Facebook ads, do you run to Amazon, or do you run to your website? Because I think you probably can buy off your website, or is it Amazon links on your website? Probably.
I link. Yeah, all my ads run right to Amazon.
Yeah.
And the reason why I do that is I've been in software for so long that I know all websites go down. And it's much more likely that my website's going to go down than Amazon.
Yeah.
and there was a period where I was running some to my website for a variety of reasons. But this one time I was on vacation for 3 days, and my website was down for those 3 days, and I spent $600 on ads for those 3 days. And I'm just thinking, like, I dropped $600, and all I did was frustrate people.
Yeah.
So I go just to Amazon. The one scenario that I wouldn't do that in, and I still don't, is that if I'm running an ad that isn't quite maybe apparent that I'm selling a book, it's a little bit more of like a story ad. I'm trying to convince people to click. I want to make sure that when they get to Amazon, they know they're looking at a book.
Yeah.
So I like to bring them then through my website, so they see like, oh, this is a thing for a book. And that way, when they do go to Amazon, it's much more, they have a better understanding of what they're getting into, because Amazon cares about the conversion on your product page.
Yes.
You send a lot of people to your Amazon product page and they just immediately leave. Amazon's like, well, this is a product that no one wants to buy. And then you're training their systems to know that. So you want to make sure that people get to your product page at Amazon, that they already know what they're getting into. Yeah. So that's the one scenario where I would route them through my website first.
And that's a great tip for any advert. You've always got to put yourself in the mind of somebody looking at it and make sure you don't confound their expectations, because that's a surefire way of having a very low relevancy on an advert.
Yeah. Yeah, I always say to people, like, I could get a great cost per click by telling people if they click this link, they get a free pony. Yeah, it's not going to sell very many books.
No, exactly. Anyone can make an ad look good on those numbers. So how many books do you have out at the moment with your name on?
I have a few books that are currently unpublished because I'm restructuring them to re-release them in a different form. But I think I've written 94 novels now.
Wow.
94 books. A couple of those are novellas. And I think right now there's 88 that are currently out. So my goal is to hit that 100 number by about mid-year this year.
Well, that'll be a little glass of champagne for then.
Oh, it totally will. I was actually thinking about, like, I need to order something good. I need some good bubbly for crossing over 100.
Yeah, that's terrific. And Mal, it's brilliant to hear of your, I mean, so it is a process, it is a procedure, it's a huge work effort, but it's also just in the value of the universe you've created, the artistic endeavor. I think it's very admirable.
Yeah, it's even though like we as authors, we often have to measure ourselves on our money and whatnot. I mean, obviously for me, making good money just is the way to make sure I can keep doing this job, and that's really what I focus on more. That's what that means to me. For me, the real thing I really want to do is I want to create this lasting, memorable universe that I've made.
Yeah.
And also, I think the fact that I think it's really cool is I've created a universe that employs other people effectively. Like I have a cover designer and an editor that get a large amount of their work from me. I've got 2 authors now that have launched themselves into full-time careers by starting out working in my universe and that sort of thing too, which means a lot to me too. That's a really big part of sort of the payoff that I get for doing all of this. And then I'm hoping that, down the road, all this will be my retirement plan, having all these books in this universe out that keep making money and stuff like that. So it is a lot about sort of creating this thing that I want to be proud of forever and put the work in to make it something that I'll be proud of, and that maybe my daughter will be able to take it up or at least have more financial security because from it as a result.
Definitely, we definitely should be proud of it. Very finally, I want to talk a little bit about you, Mel, because the very keenly observant among them will notice that you were Michael Cooper at one point.
I was, yeah.
And now you're Mel. So and the reason I mention it is I think you put a really helpful post on one of your blogs, probably on Facebook, you'll be able to tell me in a minute, where you did a little bit of deconstructing the whole trans language that I found useful, because suddenly... it's suddenly everywhere, isn't it? In the last couple of years, we're talking a lot about trans. And for people writing in this area, I think an understanding of what terms are used, what terms are controversial, some of the debate that goes on within it, it's a reasonable handle. I think it was on your Facebook page. Yeah,
I did. I posted one just about the different terms and what they mean and why they exist. So yeah, that's why I'm actually, in some respects, I'm really lucky that I started off with a pen name, writing under MD Cooper, because I didn't have to change that when I changed my name. But yeah, I used to, obviously, people might have got my earlier Facebook ads book. It was written by Michael Cooper, and now it says it's written by Mel Cooper. So that's a bit of a change. It was a really, that was a big thing that actually affected my productivity last year too. I mean, it's takes up a lot of mental space to come out as transgender. And I was honestly, when I came out, it was May 31st of 2019. I was actually expecting to have my career end as a result of that. Because I write a lot of military science fiction. And my military science fiction is primarily read by Republicans who live in the southern half of the United States and are military veterans in many cases. And I found that it did not actually affect my readership. In fact, out of my Facebook group at the time had about 600 people on it, and there was one negative comment when I posted in my Facebook group coming out as transgender to all of them.
Wow.
So And it's really, this is a sort of a stereotypical thing, but you'd have a guy that's, you got a Bud Light in one hand and an American flag behind him in his profile picture, and he's like, "You go, girl!"
Yeah.
So it was really cool to see that.
That's really cool. That's really cool because it is tempting to feel that there would be negativity around, and that generally, and I do find this in most cases, most people are supportive about what other people in most cases. It's just we do tend, I suppose, the media in particular tends to coalesce around the angry voices here and there. But
and also I guess because that's a problem that needs to be addressed. So they don't talk about the good stuff. It's not a problem that needs to be addressed. But it is a really good time to be alive, and it helped me. I had so many people that reached out and said that me coming out and being authentically who I am gave them hope and made them feel like maybe they could do the things in their lives that they wanted to be able to do. Be it like just tell their parents something they need to tell their parents or come out themselves. I get people emailing me almost once a day telling me about how they came out in some fashion, either being gay or lesbian or trans or anything like that. Or even just people saying like, I'm not a Christian, I'm an atheist, to their parents, just like that, which not all your listeners may agree with, but just the ability to come up and be honest with the people around them, and not whether you agree with someone or not, having people around you be honest with you, I think is a really good thing.
Yeah.
So that caused me to sort of realize that I could actually be this. I went from thinking my career was going to be over to realizing I could actually kind of be a voice to help other people understand things. And being trans, you get a unique perspective that very few people in the world ever get, where you very much see what it's like to be live as one gender and then live as another gender, and how people treat you, and even how your body changes on hormones and stuff like that. So it's been a really eye-opening experience for me to go through this, and also to go from. I was never really one to really like the word privilege. I think a lot of people use the word privilege as a bludgeon. I prefer more to think of it as perspective. And that growing up as a white male in Canada and the United States, I was basically at the tippity top of the social structure. And I was, I'm not an idiot. I'm intelligent enough that I can function well in society. So I've always done very well and had very few roadblocks. And it's been really quite eye-opening in so many ways to understand how the world is different for other people. And that's been helped my writing. It's helped me relate to other people better and stuff like that too. So it's been a fantastic experience for me.
That's great. This way. I can't believe it was only last year.
I know, right? It's kind of hard to believe. It's only been 6 months.
Seems like
7 months now.
It feels like Mel's been around forever, which is good.
I think it's in some ways I've always been more of an extroverted person, but I really came out of my shell a lot then too. I felt like I didn't have to hide anymore. So I've been much more active sort of visually in social media and around ever since.
And it's good with your personality. You seem to be comfortable in that role because you are going to end up probably as agony aunt, I think, to some people as well. They're going to come to you naturally, having seen you go through that process and learn from you. And are you happy with that role?
I am actually, yeah. I think of myself sort of as an ambassador, not an activist, but an ambassador, where I can kind of like share with people my perspective on things and whether or not it's useful for them or not, they can decide. But yeah, a lot of people have sort of come around and glommed onto me because I just want to. I don't know what it is. People say I have this really positive energy. I don't know exactly
you do.
I don't know. Like for me, it's sort of weird. I don't see it. I just sort of see myself being myself. But like however this positive energy works, I want to share it as much as I possibly can. So that's kind of one of my big goals these days, actually.
Yeah. And finally, just on this subject, because it is suddenly a quite fraught area as well, and we certainly see in social media. And this is why your post I thought was really interesting. Explain what TERF meant and who uses it and why they use it and so on. Mm-hmm. And it can be also a bit of a minefield, I think, not just for people writing, but for us living lives of what to say to, what pronouns, whether pronouns are an issue, whether they shouldn't be an issue. Some people don't like the whole idea of it. I think you made the point that actually it is important for some people, and just having a bit of respect for that is a really useful thing. So you've got your work cut out probably, because I think people are only going to be more exposed to this and more concerned maybe that they're going to make a mistake somewhere. And you're going to become this go-to person, Mel.
I might be. I mean, there's only the most generous estimates say there's only about 2% of the population is transgender. But if you think that you live in a town of 20,000 people, that means that there's 400 transgender people in that town, which is quite a few actually. From that you might run into transgender folks, every day. I mean, most transgender people are still in the closet, but that's going to change. And that's one of the aspects that we are seeing has changed is a lot of high profile celebrities have come out as trans in the last decade. And that's sort of like opened the floodgates for all of these people that previously were trans. And society's going to go through a bit of an adjustment period because they're going to have all these people. They're like, I thought you were one thing, but now you're something else. I think the future generation is going to have a different experience with that because they're just going to grow up this way. And it won't feel like it was this big shift that happened. So it'll be a bit of a growing pains period. We'll all get past it, and I think everybody's going to be fine in the long run. Yeah,
we'll get to the point where the culture in Ian M. Banks's sci-fi series. Have you read the Culture series?
A bit of it, yeah.
So they're set into the future, another part of the universe, but they're people. They live quite a long time, but they change sex fairly regularly. In fact, there's a conversation in one of the books where. A girl says to her male friend, she finds it really weird that he's never been a girl. And he has to kind of make an excuse as to why he's never done that. It's the unusual thing in a lifetime was not to change gender.
You can really see that if you live long enough and there's no dangerous repercussions, why wouldn't you try it out and see what it's like,
Well, Mal, thank you so much for talking. It's an absolute delight. It's been brilliant having this conversation, but also we stand around at conferences talking to you, and I remember being blown away by listening to the productivity side of your life, how organised it was, and you and Jill, and also what you've been through the last year or so. You've done it with great gusto, and you're a great voice in our community. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. It's been great to be here talking with you.
This is the Self-Publishing Show. There's never been a better time to be a writer.
There you go, Mel Cooper. Now, hopefully we're going to see her in London. In fact, she has mentioned she's chosen her catsuits. And obviously, I was expecting it to be a Union Jack catsuit, which she died at the prospect of. When I mentioned it, so that obviously she should have done that, but I don't think she has got a Union Jack catsuit. But how awesome would that be?
You could lend her yours.
I could lend her mine. Yeah, and actually towards the end of the interview, you would have noticed we talked a little bit about the whole trans world, because Mel's a bit of a spokesperson, I guess, in that sense, that she's quite prominent with her views. I think Mel writes really well on this area, and it can be quite tricky. And I think for those of us, certainly something like me, born in the 60s, adjusting language.
Here we go.
Adjusting language.
Sorry, everyone.
Is more difficult. I'm going to be fine about this. Well, I thought it was worth asking Mel about that, because she did a really good post on the pronouns, why they're important to some people. I thought it was very measured, very neutral on the subject, and useful for, I mean, you're at some point, Mark, going to introduce characters into your books, your writing, and some of the stuff that Mel writes and blogs is really worth reading to get your head around some of the issues. And you know, if you want to make it an issue in a book, Mel is a good resource for that. And also, of course, we should recognise that it can be a very emotionally tough journey for people, and Mel's done it with aplomb, come out the other side, and is now a very main part of the community, and a very welcome one. So, yeah. Well
done, Alan. You managed it.
I never shirk from talking about anything that he's talking about. We love Mel.
That's the problem.
Yeah, we're looking forward to seeing her at the conference. Right, I think that's just about it. I really feel like I've been talking a lot again. Do you want to say anything?
No, I've just been enjoying it. No, it's yes, I'm yes, quite happy. Let's leave it there. We had an extra blatch and an extra helping of blatch today. We're just let's be honest. We all need a bit of extra blatch in our lives. So everyone is happy. I shall expect nothing less than gushing comments in the YouTube. On the YouTube channel today. I saw you deleted some earlier. Well done.
Yeah, I think it was Tom actually, but I would have done. Yeah. We get lots of supportive comments and then a few negative ones, but there you go. We have to live with that. That's like the old 1-star reviews. We wear them with badges of honour. Good. Okay, excellent. Thank you very much indeed for listening. We will be back next week. Who do we have next week? I think we have Emma Prince from memory, which is going to be about how you manage when your writing is your income, how you manage career breaks when life gets in the way. In Emma's case, it was pregnancy, suddenly having a child and bringing up a child. It could be the illness of a parent or something. You know, when you work for yourself, you do have to consider this and how you plan for that, and how you make sure that your income doesn't take too much of a dip. So a really good practical interview with Emma coming up next week. And we're going to try and record some stuff, of course, in London next week as well, and try and bring that to you in the near future. Right. I think, Mark, all that leaves me to say is that it's a goodbye from him.
And a goodbye from me. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Get show notes, the podcast archive, and free resources to boost your writing career at selfpublishingshow.com. Join our thriving Facebook group at selfpublishingshow.com/Facebook. Support the show at patreon.com/selfpublishingshow. And join us next week for more help and inspiration so that you can make your mark as a successful indie author. Publishing is changing, so get your words into the world and join the revolution with The Self-Publishing Show.